Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming this morning to our service. I promised to talk about the potlatch and how that relates to our studies in metaphysics. When I was thinking about what should be the topic for my first sermon, I wondered if Dr. Vassell ever spoke about potlatches. I doubt that he did, but I think he would approve of this sermon today. At least I hope so. This morning I want to take a look at how we measure wealth, growth, and success. The tradition of the potlatch fits into this discussion nicely, and I will continue to talk this discussion in subsequent sermons. First, I'd like to begin by talking about today's Bible verses. Essentially, Jesus said, "Give up everything and follow me." Have you ever thought about that scenario? What would you do if you found yourself in the position where you had to give up everything and follow someone? The first question, of course, would be, is this person the one? Is this really the one? And granted, you'd have to get past that, and many of us have found ourselves in a position where someone took advantage of us because we got caught believing a lie. But if this person truly was the one, could we then give up everything and follow that person? That's a really tough question, and I ask you to think about that today. You know, for years in class, we've talked about emptying out our closets, our spare rooms, our storage lockers, and it's certainly a difficult task to let go of stuff. If you're lucky enough to get the strength to let go and create a vacant space, it doesn't take long before we accumulate new stuff to fill that space that we took so much effort to create. So today I want you, question I want you to think about in relation to the Bible verses is, could you give up everything and follow God? Traveling is one of life's great pleasures. It provides a wonderful opportunity for a reality check. If you take a mental trip, when you travel to other lands, you get a chance to see how other people live, what their worlds consist of, their opportunities, their values, and how they manage to survive in their societies. Last year, David and I visited Alaska. We learned about the Tlingit tribe. If you take a mental trip to Santa Monica, to the beach, and travel up north along the coast for a couple thousand miles, to where it's just a little bit cooler, you've reached the approximate region of the Tlingit tribe. They're on the southern coast of Alaska. These native Alaskan Indians measure wealth not in terms of how much they have or how much they're worth, but how much they can afford to give away. This is a fascinating approach, and when I first heard that, I thought, well, here we have the topic for a sermon. Similar to Mother Teresa, Gandhi, St. Francis, and others. The Tlingits have a tradition called the potlatch, which is several hundred years old. And I'm going to now read some excerpts from the Wikipedia. Potlatch is a ceremony among certain Native American peoples on the Pacific Northwest coast of the United States and Canadian province of British Columbia. Those tribes include the Haida, Tlingit, Tsimshian, Salish, Nuuchnuuth, and the Waka Waka Waka. The potlatch takes the form of a ceremonial feast, traditionally featuring seal meat or salmon. In it, hierarchical relations between groups were observed and reinforced through the exchange of gifts and other ceremonies. The host demonstrates their wealth and prominence through giving away their possessions and thus prompt participants to reciprocate when they hold their own potlatch. Originally, the potlatch was held to celebrate events in the life cycle of the host family, such as the birth of a child. However, the influx of manufactured goods, such as blankets and pieces of copper into the Pacific Northwest, caused inflation in the potlatch in the 18th and 19th centuries, so over a couple hundred years, quite a few generations. Some groups, such as the Waka Waka Waka, used the potlatch as an arena in which highly competitive contests of status took place. In some cases, goods were actually destroyed after being received. Now, what I gather from the last sentence is that that's a little bit like today, in today's society, lighting a cigar with a $100 bill. So a potlatch is a ceremonial feast of salmon and or seal meat held by Native American Indians in honor of some familial event, such as a wedding, a birth of a child, or a death. Now, when we visited Skagway, Alaska, I recall walking through the town and finding a stream. Now, this stream was maybe this wide and maybe a foot deep. You could literally reach down into the stream and have your pick of dozens of salmon. And these salmon are like so big and so big around. And what's amazing in Alaska is that there's just an abundance of everything. It appears that we would never run out of resources. Of course, we've demonstrated that we can run out of resources if we do make that effort. But when you're up there and you see these salmon that are just down there and you can grab one and there's your dinner. And if you had to feed a bunch of people for a bunch of days, that would be a terrific source. I assume the same is true of the seal meat. I guess we did see some seals, and they are big animals and plentiful, and quite a few of them around. So you could literally just reach down in the stream and pick up a salmon. We didn't, but if I lived there, and also the stream was literally narrow enough that I probably could have straddled the stream and just picked whatever, which is really quite amazing. And it's just another example of God's abundance. It's just out there and nothing else, no 7-Elevens. At least back with the time we're talking about. I'd like to relate the story that we heard which explains the potlatch. Let's say there's a marriage and a celebration to be given by the host of the bride, the father of the bride. Friends and relatives are invited to the celebration called a potlatch. Many guests had to travel by boat. There were no superhighways up there. They all had boats. They moved up and down the coast and visited their friends and traded and made their livings that way. So the duration of the potlatch was based upon the duration of the longest journey to the celebration. In other words,